Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today I want to talk about this book here. I'll put a picture of it on the screen because the glare of the lights is not going to do it. But it's called Jewish Utopia by Michael Higger, PhD. And multiple of you have recommended that I read this book and review it on multiple platforms, as a matter of fact. And it's really got a lot of interesting stuff in it that's pertinent to nowadays. So let me kind of start at the end and kind of give you the conclusions, and then I'll go into some examples of it. But basically, this book is about Jewish eschatology. So in Judaism, their end times, which I find that almost nobody I've ever talked to knows about. I didn't know about a lot of this stuff. And I could have used this information in earlier videos, honestly, like the video on the third temple. But basically, one of the conclusions is that this book shows you why Orthodox Judaism Jews today aren't Zionists and don't support Israel. Because the problem is that the Israel today, like 1948, 1949 Israel until today, this is not the country promised to them because in their eschatology, it's not just future life stuff. Like a lot of Christianity is like waiting for some future life. You're working towards that. Here, you're working towards physical things on this life as well as kind of a spiritual on earth afterlife. I'll talk about that. But Israel, the Israel that exists, is none of those things. So it's almost Israel existing is a debunking of Judaism more than, and it's definitely not a fulfillment because it doesn't meet any of the criteria. And so we're going to talk more about that. I think it's interesting. And then basically the entire premise of Judaism is that the whole world kind of like everybody sucks except for Jews, and Jews also kind of suck, But if they were just to be righteous enough, then they would trigger all these things that would make their end times. And basically, they could help all of the lesser people of the world come to God. Like in Judaism, they don't do proselytizing. They don't go out and try to get you to join. But in their end time scenario, they will try to get you to join, and all the righteous will join them, and all of the wicked will kind of end up losing, we'll say. And it ends up being such a thing that it's kind of like if you were like, say, a white supremacist, and you were like, okay, you know what we need to do? We need to go down to Africa and we need to help them because they can't do it by themselves. Now, they might be able to do it by themselves if the United States wasn't interfering all the time. But really, it's a really supremacist idea. Like, okay, as a white supremacist, you need to go to China to help them how to have civilization. They've had civilization for thousands and thousands of years. The idea that a white person needs to go there and tell them how it's done is a wild form of supremacy. And that's what the book is like. It's like all of these people, they're counting on us. Because if we could just be Jews and be righteous enough, then we can bring all these people in, And basically it leads to a universal state is where their end game lies. And so another conclusion I had is that it's really supremacist what they're doing. And another one is like, because of the existence of modern Israel, it's like Judaism is like a cult that failed in their prophecy. They predicted the second coming or whatever. And it's like, oh man, if that prediction doesn't come true, then everything you've worked for is. So anyways, they've got all these predictions about how their new country is going to come about. Because this is, this book's written in 1932, but it goes all the way back to 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century. So all through the diaspora, it's gathering all the information about the rabbis about the end times. And it's saying, and this is how we're going to come to a country again one day. And none of those things relate to current Israel. So let me give you an example of this, okay? Page 65, it says, second, the restoration of the ideal people, which is Jews, on the ideal land, which is, I'll tell you about that in a second, it's going to be Zion, will signify universal peace and brotherhood. Jerusalem will become the center of the free and liberated universal Israel because the city of God would be a living example of universal peace and brotherhood. So in their end time, the creation of this country is going to be universal peace and brotherhood on the world. And if you kind of look at Israel since 1948 and you say, are they a representation of universal peace and brotherhood? I would say the opposite. And so not that it necessarily, the existence of Israel discredits Judaism completely, because there could be a situation where in 20 years, all the boomers are gone in the United States. So the United States has no support for Israel. Israel's gone in 20 years. Jews are dispersed. And then 1,000 years later, they reform their Zion in Palestine with with the ideal people. And that could be a thing. It's just that it's nothing related to the reality that we're in. So another thing I found interesting about it is that everything in the book, okay, well, a couple different things. So normally with like a utopian type of book like this, normally it shows you a way to get to that utopia. And in this book, it doesn't do that. It's like the Jews believe that it's just going to magically happen. And so there's nothing, I mean, the only thing they have to do is just to reach a certain level of righteousness. And then everything will magically happen. Now they'll be in utopia. And that's not normally how utopian books work. They normally have a path. If you were just to follow this path, theoretically, you could get to this goal. And then here's, now I want to draw you the image of what utopia would look like and then try to achieve this. This one, it just has to magically happen. So it's kind of like, if you were a Jew and you believed in this stuff, you kind of live in a different world than everyone else, which is what we see going back to the Anaxagoras one with the dualist and the relativist. It's kind of like we live in different worlds. And that's interesting because in the Jewish religion, as it points out in the book, they don't have a concept of faith. The only so they're basically have faith that this whole thing will come about, but they don't have any concept of faith. They only have a concept of faithfulness, like faithfulness to God, but it's just wildly faith-based though, but they don't do that. So anyways, let's get down. Okay, and also it's a heavily referenced book, right? It's got 601 references in 108 pages. And so, I mean, like a third or a quarter of the book's just references. Okay, and it was written by this guy named Michael Higger, who was in 1932, so before World War II, and before, obviously, the establishment of Israel. So he was born in 1898 in Lithuania, kind of Ukraine, immigrated to the U.S. in 1915 via Canada, because of discrimination by the Tsar of Russia. He was educated at New York and Columbia universities, but he received his rabbinic ordination by the Jewish Theological Seminary, or JTS, in New York. And then beginning 1930 on, he ended up publishing a significant 10-volume work, which collected rabbinic texts with variant readings. So like, he did important contributions to Judaism, and this is what he was dedicated to. I looked, he wasn't into politics. He didn't comment on World War II, Holocaust, none of that. He was focused on the religion, you know? Okay, so let's do terminology real quick. So we're before the country of Israel is established. So in this book, when they say Israel, they're talking about Jews. And I thought about this, and I was like, I wonder if at one point they called themselves Jews, and then at another point, they started calling themselves Israel as a people, which is a good strategy because remember back to the controversy over Genesis, where it's, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. And so you could just name anything you want Israel. You know, Israel was a place with Israelites that is no more. And so now there's these scattered people, and it's like, well, maybe we'll just call ourselves Israel, and then you'll have to bless us. And maybe they'll make a country and just call that Israel too, and then you got to bless us. Because, I mean, if they make a business and it's called like Israel Inc., do you have to bless that company? You know, you could just keep attaching it. So I don't know if that's just my speculation. But basically, on page 96, it says, Israel, the ideal people of justice and righteousness, will have their spiritual center at the temple, through which they will promulgate and proclaim the justice and righteousness, the glory and greatness of the Lord. So the people are Israel. And then the land that they're going to be in is called Palestine, which is great because that's pretty ironic based on what's going on today. Same page. The ideal temple in an ideal Jerusalem, the capital of the ideal Palestine, will thus be the source of universal joy, blessings, goodness, gladness, and happiness. And having their country in Palestine would just be an added bonus, because it does talk in here about how at this time in 1932, they were looking around at any country that was a failed state and saying, hey, it could be there. It could be China. It could be Germany. They even thought about making their new country in Germany during the Weimar Republic because the conditions were so poor. This was during the Great Depression before Hitler did the Restoration, which would start the following year after this book was done in 1933. And then the country that they want in their Jewish eschatology is not called Israel at all. It's called Zion. If you go to page 83, we are in a position to discuss the nature of the ideal city of Jerusalem as pictured in the rabbinic utopia. The rebuilding of that city is part of the plan of the ideal country, Zion. Jerusalem will be the capital of Zion. What Zion will mean to the world, Jerusalem will mean to Zion. So if Jerusalem is the capital of Zion, and what Zion will mean to the world? Jerusalem will mean to Zion. That means Zion will be Zion will be the capital of the world, and Jerusalem will be the capital of Zion. Obviously, that's not the conditions, or could ever be the conditions of modern day Israel at all. Okay, so now I'm going to go into more detail about the specifics of, if you're interested, I don't know how interested you are, but that's the general what's going on but I'm going to go into specifics. So basically everybody in the world is marked. It says, like, imagine a hands going over every single country. It's just marking everybody righteous or wicked. There's just no gray area. There's righteous and wicked. This is both Jew and Gentile. And interesting here is that their religion, on whether you're termed righteous or wicked, doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not. It specifically says both Jewish people will be marked righteous and wicked, and both non-Jews will be marked righteous and wicked, right? And then it puts you into these two camps. And now later on in the eschatological framework, later on, a lot of the wicked are going to become righteous, because when the people, Israel in Zion, make this perfect society, it's just going to convert so many people, which is obviously not what it's like today. But then it's like, eventually it's like, all the treasures and natural resources of the world will eventually come in possession of the righteous, right? But the righteous doesn't necessarily mean only Jews, because remember, they're going to become a heavy proselytizing thing once they kind of attain like earthly nirvana, Okay, there's also some of the rabbi stuff in here where the rabbis are more important than God. Like already page 15, it says, after the meetings, God will be sanctified by one of the members of the group, and this sanctification would be universally approved by popular acclamation. I'm sorry, I don't know. It's as if God needs to be sanctified by rabbis. I don't know. It's just more of that ridiculous stuff. And then there's there's stupid stuff involved. Here's one of the stupid things. There's a lot of communist stuff too, but here's one of the stupid things. According to another tradition, God will give to each righteous 310 worlds, so 310 worlds as his own possession. That's pretty ridiculous, Okay, and then it's going on about who the wicked people are, and get this is hilarious. So this is page 21, okay? Fourth, speculators, dishonest industrialists, and all those who accumulate wealth at the expense of the suffering of their fellow men will be unknown entities in the rabbinic utopia. Although like the cedars of the forest, they are rooted in the life of the present era, their end will come before the kingdom of God is ushered in. Pretty funny that the Jewish rabbis are putting the wicked as speculators, dishonest industrialists, and those who accumulate wealth at the expense of others. Then in chapter 3, it talks about Israel and the nation. So Israel is the people, not the country, remember? And it's delusional. Okay, check us out. This is page 29, the beginning of the chapter. A model ideal state comprising a group of righteous individuals and living an ideal life will gradually spread its teaching and influence from nation to nation throughout the world. The kingdom of God will then become a fact. Okay, that's plausible that could happen, right? But get this. Israel is the only nation that is suited for that purpose. The religious experiences of Israel, so as the people, and the ideology of that people, as voiced by the prophets, qualify it to lead the world in establishing a universal utopia. Just imagine if you just said, man, if you just behaved like Jewish people, like as righteous as them, everything would work out perfect, The people of Israel will thus conquer spiritually the nations of the earth, so that Israel will be made high above all nations in praise, in name, and in glory. Do you see what I'm talking about when it's like, it's like you're living in a different world. Like you're pretending that Jewish people are like ultra righteous. I don't know. It's like, it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite. You could do something like and talk about Buddhist monks and stuff like that, because they're completely devoted to what they're working on, their spiritual path. And then you just open up Twitter, and I just opened it up yesterday morning, and it was a rabbi in the United States went to meet a 14-year-old boy from an app. But you're trying to, okay, whatever, the deal. Before the nations of the world recognize Israel as the ideal people, Israel will have to undergo spiritual development. The Jew will have to be prepared to lead the world to righteousness, for it will be a serious and daring challenge to Israel, a challenge in which the fate of humanity will be involved. It's like saying, say I say, my people really suck. They're just they'll cheat you at every point. But if they developed spiritually and became the most righteous people, they could totally lead everybody into, a great ideal utopia of righteousness. Well, but you're the farthest ones away from that. You've got the farthest to go. So just, I don't know. It just seems silly to me. Okay, let's talk about their Messiah for a second. So on page 42, it says, hence with the advent of the Messiah who will usher in the ideal era, all the national ensigns and laws, which are barriers to genuine international peace, brotherhood, and the happiness of mankind will gradually disappear. So they're going to do away with nations and it's going to go to a universal state, like I said before. But it's interesting. So about their Messiah and then the building of the temple, which is something I hadn't grasped when I was doing the video on will Trump allow them to build the third temple. And one of the way, there's two different ways that it could happen in Jewish eschatology. And one of the ways is that it kind of just magically happens. Like the Messiah comes, lays the first stone, and then with supernatural speed, the people of Israel, of the country Zion, in the land of Palestine, supernaturally just build it. And it's built like in a day. So like when I was talking about would Trump allow them to build it, I'm talking like a human being who thinks about like just things in real life, like actual building buildings. And if you were a Jewish rabbi watching that video, you would just be mocking me for just being as intelligent as an animal, because you don't understand. I'm just going to wake up one day and it's going to be there. Obviously, there's no proof or evidence that this has ever happened before, or you know what I mean. But it's going to happen this time. And that's why I was talking about how it's like living in a separate world. Now, the other way it could happen is that the people of Zion start building the third temple, and the Messiah will come in at the end and finish it. And that could take them decades it depends how long they spend building it. So theoretically, there could be a situation where they actually start building the temple. I don't know how that would work. Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa, we don't know about that. But theoretically, they could start building it and just make it drag for decades and decades and decades. Because if the Messiah never comes to finish it, they just got to keep working on it. Then you're kind of like Penelope and, undoing your work every night, to wait for Odysseus to come home, And so they might get stuck in that situation. So like I said, there's some communism in the religion. They talk about how the cause of wars and stuff is general poverty of a part of the population. And then it says here on page 50, the cause of all discords and struggles and the disproportionate distribution of life's necessities among men, where part of the people have too much and others have little or nothing. Universal peace and brotherhood will be established on earth only when that obstacle be removed, when each man will be given a chance to earn and possess the necessary things which make his life happy and wholesome. And then they make it like kind of like a voluntary type of communism, because it says, for love, brotherhood, and genuine friendship will exist only when there are abundance and plenty, so that those who are fortunate to possess them will see to it that they are distributed equally among all people. So, I mean, if I would classify communism as a forced redistribution, whereas here they allude to a voluntary redistribution. I also think that the disparity problem is huge, and government policy should address that, but it shouldn't be based on redistribution, like forcible redistribution of already earned, unless it's earned in an unscrupulous manner, in which case I'm totally fine with it. If it was the right system doing it and they target it to the correct people. Okay, here's some more communism on page 57. There will always be steady employment, since production and distribution will be scientifically and universally regulated to meet the needs of the population, which never indulges in war or greedy economic striving. Production will be organized internationally and not nationally. Raw materials likewise will be controlled by a central authority so that the present waste will disappear. And so then that just sounds like communism. Then there's some stuff in here about literally like a page ago, they're talking about according to one tradition, every woman of the righteous women will give birth daily in order to basically fulfill some of the prophecies, like to Abraham, your descendants will be, more than the grains of sand in the sea, and I mean, some of them get down to that there's going to be birthing hourly, just to create all these children. Now, that doesn't make any sense to just, how would you, I mean, I have children. How could you raise 100 children? How is that a thing? One set of parents. How could you do it? Oh, then the community can't do it, because if every family has 100 children, we're not even talking about 100. Daily is 365 kids a year. So that doesn't make sense. But whatever, they have 310 worlds each to govern. So maybe that works out. Also, once all this ideal stuff is established, there'll be no death. And so, okay, they also have this interesting like kind of like a blood and soil ideology, which is interesting. Because they're tied, the religion's tied to this physical thing that they gain, which is the land, right? So on page 63 here, so it's a chapter about liberty and salvation, but it starts like this. As Abravanel has convincingly proved, Jewish redemption stands for the physical liberation and freedom of Israel. So the physical liberation of the people, Israel. For the people of Israel will attain the height of their spiritual functions and potentialities only through their attainment of material freedom and liberty. The problem of their spiritual development goes hand in hand with the problem of their physical safety and protection. So if they just had physical land, they would be able to advance spiritually way beyond the current state where they're at, which turns out to be completely false, because then you can complain about security as you attack every single one of your neighbors in the most unpeaceful, unbrotherhoody country on the planet, and then you can complain that you don't have spiritual development because you still don't have your safety, but your physical demand has been met. Now, I do agree with them on the blood and soil point that every people needs their own land. They need their safety and protection, and then they can advance in all manner of ways much, much faster than they can if they're a scattered group of people. This goes for Jewish people. This goes for Palestinians. This goes for everybody. Every group, Assyrians deserve a land, in my opinion. Like, you don't need a Yugoslavia that has all these different nationalities and ethnicities mixed together. I don't think that makes the ideal situation for them to thrive as peoples, and I think that every people deserves to have land. And so I agree with them there. It's just that for them it didn't work out. They blamed their lack of spiritual progress, or just below average spiritual progress, on not having land. And then they say, if we get the land, then we'll be able to achieve this thing. And of course, this is made in 1932, not seeing what happened and how horrifyingly terrible it is, and how, the pedophiles flee to Israel because they won't extradite them, or they'll take 20 years to extradite them. That's where your spiritual progress has led you. And that's an interesting point, because in here, there's a point, I didn't find it right now, but there's a point where they say, hey, our people, we got problems with sins and stuff like that. But if we just get rid of some things like murder, and then it starts naming things, and it names 6 different things that Israel, the people of Israel, have problems with. Number 3 on that list is like an unusual passion for boys. Is number 3 on the list of 6 problems that these people have that are going to be all fixed in this ideal world. And I think that's interesting, because in 1932, you even admit that in the United States, this is not in Weimar Germany, where they're, the Jewish people are running the trafficking and the prostitution of children and stuff like that. This is in New York in 1932. And so you're just very cognizant of the nature of your people, but don't worry, they're going to become the most spiritual people on the planet. Just a couple more points I want to hit. This is in chapter 6, the Holy Land, but it's not related to that. But listen to this. This is about what Jews' goal is on the planet. And it's so distorted from reality. Okay, traditional Jews would therefore not disagree with the modern Reformed Jews when the latter state that, quote, the call of the Jew, end quote, is supposed to be for the benefit of humanity and not primarily for themselves. Okay, then it goes on to say how Reformed Jews do not believe that. But they believe that the call of the Jew is supposed to be for the benefit of humanity and not primarily for themselves. Just think about life, just think about Jewish people in life and how none of it is for the benefit of humanity. There have been positive things, like, the SPLC, or was it the SPLC who defended by Chicago, the Nazis, because they just believed in free speech so much, which is a good principle, and that's kudos to them. But just look at the massive amount of terribleness that's ensued worldwide, in countries all around the world, international banking, financing off of both world wars on both sides, just the terribleness. And then, but in their distorted reality, they believe that they have the call of the Jew and that they're out there to benefit humanity. And it's it's not real life. They're living in a different world than us. And it's like I was saying in the previous Anticonspirian episode, how do you deal with people like that on any basis? You can't come, because they just think you just don't understand. You're just not informed, about this type of stuff. And even if you're informed about it, you just realize that this is the stupidest stuff. You don't get this when you read the Quran. This is not your experience. You're not like, wait, what the heck? No, this is real, Because Islam is not disjointed from reality in this way. It's consistent with reality if you believe these things and then you follow these methods. It's easy. It's like Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. You just follow a different path, And this is just like living in la la land, and pretending that everybody else, all the goy, all the nations, everybody's just stupid except for you, and just believe it and keep your head up. I mean, whatever. Okay, I found the page about the boys. Okay, this is on page 96 and 97. East and west have hymned forth the glory of God, for no longer are wretched mortals beset with deeds of shame, adulteries, and unnatural passion for boys, murder and tumult, but rivalry is fair among all. So 5 different things it named: murder, shame, adulteries, tumult, and unnatural passion for boys. Thought it was pretty funny. I kind of think I'm done, I want to tell you about how it ends, A New World. Yeah, because then we get to the end. So basically you have this period called the Messianic period, and it's gonna be initiated with the rebuilding of the third temple, where sacrifices will be offered again. Then it's gonna usher in this mortal period wherein the righteous are separated from the wicked. There'll be massive conversion because, of course, these ultra spiritual people in Zion, the people of Israel, will just through their example convert all the people who are apt to be righteous. The wicked will be done away with. Then only the righteous are left. Then they'll get their immortality and their babies every hour or day and their 310 worlds and just all that nonsense, But that's in physical, and everything will just be happiness. There'll be no sin. There'll be no problems. It's kind of like going back to the Garden of Eden, And then after that, there's going to be like this new world, and it's going to be like kind of the same thing, but just spirit bodies. And so it's kind of like heaven, but it's like heaven on earth. So like instead of the spiritual body residing in heaven, the spiritual body resides on earth, but just similar. Anyways, I think it's interesting to get into like the craziness or the psychopathy of just living in a different world. And I want to impress again the fact that Christians and Muslims don't live in a different world. You can be a Christian, you could talk to a Muslim, or vice versa, and you can, I disagree with you on that, but you're not like a loon. You're not like a crazy person. And this is a craziness which is paired with a people who are they know that they're so superior to you that when you say that it's craziness, they'll look at you and be like, little children, you don't understand. It's okay. And so it creates this narcissism and hubris. And if you take that and apply it to a lot of things you see in the world, I think a lot of things make sense. And so anyways, okay, so on I don't have an episode for you on Thursday, but I'm going to publish this one that a viewer sent me, Harry, and it's on the Disputation of Paris, which is where they did 35 charges against the Talmud and ended up convicting the Talmud of blasphemy and burning, cartfuls of them. And then into the future, they just kept burning the Talmuds for saying all the evil stuff that everybody claims that is in it today, that the Jews claim is not in it, but they confiscated all the, So anyways, I'm gonna do an intro on that, and then I'm gonna play that on Thursday. I am gonna do a full episode on the Disputation of Paris. There's so much reading and stuff to go into it that it's taken a really long time. I've been putting it together for literally months. It's funny because it's gonna be like a 25-30 minute episode, and I've been working on it. But anyway, some episodes are harder than others. So I'll have that for you guys on Thursday. Hope to see you there.